3 days before I was supposed to close on our first house together, my business partner of 6 years emptied our joint account, forged my signature on the dissolution papers, and walked into a meeting with our biggest client to introduce himself as the sole founder of everything we had built. My parents told me to let it go because he was family. 2 months later, I watched their perfect little empire get dismantled piece by piece. And I didn't have to do a single thing to make it happen. Hey Reddit. I never thought I'd be the guy posting something like this. I'm not usually the type to air out personal stuff online, but I've been sitting on this for a while now, and honestly, I think I need to get it out. My name's Julian. I'm 34. And until about 8 months ago, I genuinely believed I was one of the lucky ones. Good career, solid partner, close family. That was the story I told myself. Turns out I was the last person in the room to realize it wasn't true. Let me start at the beginning. I met my business partner, Evan, when we were both 27. We were working the same dead-end marketing job at a mid-size firm in Charlotte, and we were both miserable in exactly the same ways. Same complaints about the same micromanaging VP, same lunch spot every Thursday, same running joke about how we'd do everything differently if we just had the nerve to quit. One Friday after work, sitting at a bar with bad lighting and cheaper beer, we actually made the plan. 2 years to save up, then we'd launch something of our own. We called it Meridian Creative. Small brand strategy consultancy, started out of my spare bedroom. We were good at it too. Not overnight success good, but the real kind. Slow, grinding. Every new client feeling like a miracle, every late night feeling like investment. By year 3, we had a real office, a team of 7 and a client list that included 2 regional banks and a healthcare network. By year 5 we had our first six-figure contract. Evan was, front of house guy. Charming, smooth, the kind of person who could walk into a boardroom and make everyone feel like they'd already decided to say yes. I was the back end, creative direction, strategy, the actual work that made the pitch worth something. We were a good match, or I thought we were. About a year ago, things started feeling off. Little things first. Evan started taking meetings I wasn't looped into, client dinners I heard about secondhand. He hired a new account manager without running it by me, said he'd forgotten, laughed it off. I let it go because we'd been together 6 years, and I figured I was reading into things. Then my cousin started dating him. Her name's Piper. We've always been close. She's 2 years younger than me, grew up practically in my house. She's funny and sharp and the kind of person who asks the right questions. I was happy for them at first, genuinely. I thought it was a little strange, dating someone that close to my work, but Evan and I were family at that point, or so I thought. The dinners started changing after that. Family stuff that used to just be me and my parents, and my aunt's side of the family, started including Evan naturally. He and my dad bonded over football. My mom liked him. My uncle, Piper's dad, had always been more impressed by success than by anything else, and Evan had plenty of that. Or at least, plenty of the appearance of it. I started noticing how often the table deferred to him. How he'd tell a story about a client win and not mention me. How my dad would laugh at his jokes and then ask me how things were going at Evan's company. Not our company, Evan's company. I wrote it off. People conflate things. They don't mean it. He's the face, that's just how it reads from the outside. 3 days before, we were set to close on a building we'd been planning to buy together. An old warehouse we'd spent 8 months converting into our permanent office space. I got a call from our bank. There was a problem with the account authorization. Could I come in? I thought it was a clerical thing. I drove over on my lunch break and sat down across from a very professional, very careful woman who slid a form across the desk and asked if I recognized the signature. It was mine, except it wasn't. It was a partnership dissolution notice. Filed 2 weeks prior. According to the paperwork, I had voluntarily withdrawn from Meridian Creative, relinquishing all ownership interest in exchange for a buyout that had already been transferred to an account I didn't recognize. I sat in that chair for a long time. The woman across from me was saying something about fraud protocols, next steps, whether I wanted to speak with their legal team. I kept staring at my name in someone else's handwriting. I called Evan from the parking lot. He picked up on the second ring, casual as anything. Hey, what's up? I'm sitting outside First Carolina Bank, I said. You want to tell me what the hell is going on? There was a pause. Then Julian? I've been trying to figure out how to have this conversation with you. Have it now. He sighed like I was the one making things difficult. He said he'd been thinking about the direction of the company for a while. That he felt like we'd grown apart creatively. That he'd been talking to some investors, and they wanted a cleaner ownership structure. That he thought this was actually better for both of us. That the buyout was fair, he'd had it appraised. That he hoped we could still be friends. I hung up, I drove home, called my attorney, and sat on my kitchen floor for about an hour before I could figure out what to do with my hands. Here is the part that I still can't fully wrap my head around, even now. When I called my parents that night and explained what had happened, my father's first response was, "Are you sure you're reading this right?" I was sure, My attorney was sure, the forged signature was sure. He said, "Evan's a good guy, Julian. He wouldn't do something like that intentionally. Maybe there was a miscommunication." I asked him if he understood what a forged signature was. My mom got on the phone. She said, "We just don't want you making this into something bigger than it is. Evan's going to be part of this family. Piper loves him. You don't want to blow that up over a business disagreement." Business disagreement. 6 years. My idea, my spare bedroom, my signature, apparently. I told them I was filing a complaint with the state and pursuing litigation. My dad said I was being dramatic. My mom said to think about Piper's feelings. Over the next 2 weeks, I learned a few things. Evan had scheduled a meeting with our largest client, a healthcare network worth just over $2 million in annual contracts. 3 days after the dissolution filing, he'd walked in and introduced himself as the sole founder and managing director of Meridian Creative. He'd brought new business cards. He'd told them I had stepped back to pursue other opportunities. They had no reason to doubt him. He was the one they'd always seen at the table. I also found out that he'd been laying this groundwork for almost 4 months. A new LLC, registered in his name only, with an almost identical name. Meridian strategy that he'd been quietly pointing new leads toward. He'd had a new website built. He'd moved the junior team members over one by one, framed it as an internal restructuring. When I brought all of this to my parents, spelled it out with documents, my dad said, "Well, you have to admit, you were never the business development side of things." I just looked at him. My mom said, "We're not taking sides. We just want peace in this family." Piper called me a few days later. I thought maybe she was calling to say something. Instead, she said, "I know this is really hard, but Evan explained everything, and I think there's more to the story. Can you just give him a chance to sit down with you? Give him a chance. The guy who forged my name on legal documents, sure." I told her, I loved her, and that I hoped she'd be okay, and then I stopped answering calls from that side of the family. My attorney moved fast. We had a solid fraud case. The signature forgery alone was a felony under North Carolina law. The problem was that litigation takes time, and in the meantime, Evan was operating the business, servicing the clients, and getting paid. My attorney filed for a temporary restraining order on the transfer of business assets, which bought us some breathing room, but it was going to be months before any of this resolved. In the meantime, I needed income. I had enough saved to cover myself for about 4 months. But after that, I had to figure something out. I reached out to a few people I'd worked with over the years. One of them, a brand director at a large regional hospital system, called me back within 48 hours. She said she'd always wanted to work with me directly, and had assumed I wasn't available because I was running Meridian. She hired me as a senior consultant on a project basis, and within 6 weeks, I had 2 more clients who came through her network. I wasn't okay. I want to be honest about that. I was angry in a way I didn't have a lot of experience managing. There were nights I'd drive around for an hour because I couldn't sit still. There were mornings I'd be fine and then remember something. A specific conversation with Evan. A late night we'd worked until 2 a.m. On a pitch, a handshake in a parking lot after we landed our first big client. And it would hit me sideways. Grief isn't just for people. It's for the version of your life you thought you were building. My parents kept leaving messages. Invitations to Sunday dinners where Evan would apparently also be attending. Voicemails from my mom about not letting this ruin the holidays. My dad left one message, very businesslike, suggesting that maybe I should consider dropping the lawsuit because dragging this through the courts is going to cost everyone, and Evan said he's willing to negotiate. Evan said. I stopped going to family dinners. About 3 months in, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "This is Claudine Marsh. We haven't met, but I think we need to talk. It's about Meridian and some things you don't know yet." I almost ignored it. I figured it was some angle Evan was running. But something made me call back. Claudine turned out to be the account manager Evan had hired without telling me. The one I'd noticed about 8 months before everything blew up. She said she'd left the company 2 weeks ago. She said she had copies of emails, internal documents, and a recorded conversation. We met at a coffee shop near her apartment. She was organized, quiet, and visibly nervous. She set a folder on the table and slid it across. What she had was substantial. Emails between Evan and one of our original investors showing that the plan to push me out had started over a year ago. Long before he started dating Piper. The investor had put in $250,000 early on, and had been pressuring Evan to consolidate ownership, claiming the dual founder structure was unteedy for future acquisition. Evan hadn't told me any of this. Instead, he'd been quietly agreeing to it, planning around it, and waiting for the right moment. The recorded conversation was the worst part. It was a phone call between Evan and the investor, maybe 3 months before the dissolution filing. Evan said, and I'm paraphrasing because I'm not going to remember every word, that Julian, meaning me, was emotionally attached to the original vision, and resistant to the kind of pivot we need to make this acquisition ready. That the cleanest way to handle it was to make the exit look voluntary, that he had a plan. I sat across from Claudine and read the transcript of that call 3 times. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. She looked at the table. "Because he told me the same things about you that he tells everyone about the person he's done with. And I've seen it before. He ran a previous agency out of Atlanta." "Did you know that?" I didn't. "Same story," she said. "Different partner." I thanked her. I didn't cry in the coffee shop, which felt like an achievement. My attorney nearly fell out of his chair when I brought him the folder. The recorded call alone changed our entire legal position. We went from defending against a forged dissolution to having documented evidence of premeditated fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. We filed an amended complaint. We subpoenaed the investors' communications. We sent a litigation hold notice to every financial institution Evan had touched. 3 weeks after we filed the amended complaint, Evan called me for the first time since that parking lot phone call. "Julian." His voice was different, tighter. "I think we should talk. My attorney handles all communication now," I said. "You have his number." I hung up before he could say anything else. It was a very small moment. It felt enormous. The litigation hold froze a significant portion of the business assets pending the investigation. One of the regional banks, a client we'd brought on in year 2. A relationship I'd personally built from a cold email, pulled their contract. They said they had concerns about leadership instability. 2 other clients followed within a month. Then the state bar got involved. One of the documents Claudine had provided touched on some communications between Evan and a law firm he'd used to process the dissolutions, and there were questions about whether that firm had known the signature was forged. That turned into its own investigation. I wasn't watching any of this closely. My attorney kept me updated, but I had stopped checking Evan's LinkedIn, stopped driving past the office, stopped asking mutual contacts what they'd heard. It wasn't healthy. I had work to do. I had a life to rebuild. But I heard things. I heard that Piper and Evan had a rough stretch around month 4. That she'd found something on his phone, nobody told me what, specifically, and that they'd had a serious fight. I didn't reach out to her. It wasn't my place. I heard that my uncle had started asking questions once the lawsuit became public record, and a local business publication ran a short item about it. My uncle is the kind of man who researches things. Once he started digging, apparently he found the Atlanta story too. I heard he did not handle it quietly. I heard that my dad finally read the amended complaint. My attorney had sent a copy to the family which I'd approved, and that he sat with it for 2 days without saying anything to anyone. Then he called me. It was a Sunday morning. I was making coffee. His name came up on my phone and I stood there for a second, deciding. I answered. He didn't say hello. He said, "I read the whole thing." "Okay," I said. "I owe you an apology." He said it quietly, without preface, which was unusual for him. My dad is not a man who apologizes easily. "I should have believed you from the beginning. I let myself too comfortable with him, and when you told me what happened I made you prove it instead of just trusting you. That was wrong." I didn't say anything for a minute. "It took you 3 months, I finally said. "I know. He was in our house for Christmas, Dad." "I wasn't." "I know. We talked for about an hour. It was uncomfortable and necessary and it didn't fix anything. But it was real. My dad is not the villain of this story. He made bad choices that hurt me in a bad moment and he owned them. That matters." My mom called later the same day. She cried. I let her. I didn't rush it. Piper texted me about a week later. "Just, can we get coffee sometime? No pressure, no agenda. I just miss you." I waited a few days then said yes. We met at a place near her apartment. She looked tired. She told me she'd ended things with Evan about 3 weeks before. She'd found a message on his phone, not what I'd imagined, actually worse in a smaller, more personal way. He'd been talking to someone he'd met at a conference. Nothing physical yet, but the conversation made clear it was heading that direction. She'd confronted him. He'd gone into crisis management mode. It's explained, minimized, reframed. She said the thing that broke her wasn't the message itself, but how quickly and smoothly he tried to make her feel like she was misreading it. "He does that," she said. "Makes you feel like you're the one who's confused." I nodded. "He did it to you too," she said. "It wasn't a question." "For 6 years," I said. We sat there for a while. She ordered another coffee. "I did too. I'm sorry I didn't believe you right away," she said. "You were in love with him," I said. "It's not the same thing as what my dad did." She laughed a little, sad. "It kind of is though, maybe. But she's my cousin, and she was being honest with me and that counted for something." The lawsuit settled 8 months after I filed. I'm not going to get into the specific numbers because the agreement has a confidentiality clause. But I will say it was enough to restart. Enough to set up a new entity, make the necessary hires, and have runway for 2 years without panicking. The state bar concluded their review of the law firm and issued sanctions. That part's public record. Evan's relationship with the original investor dissolved somewhere in the middle of all this, apparently over disagreements about how to handle the legal exposure. Last I heard he's working independently. Small clients, nothing like what we had. I started my new firm 4 months ago. I named it Foundry. Just the one word. I took on two of the people who'd originally been with Meridian. Both came back on their own, reached out to me, said they'd felt uncomfortable about how things had been handled, and wanted to work with someone they trusted. That meant more than I expected. The healthcare client, who first brought me on as a solo consultant, is now my anchor account. I have 3 others. It's not year 5 Meridian yet, but it's mine. Every decision, every hire, every pitch, mine. I live alone in an apartment that I like more than any place I've lived. I repainted the bedroom a color my ex used to say was too dark. Turns out I love it. I have a couch that faces the window instead of the TV, because I wanted it that way and nobody's around to tell me it's impractical. A few weeks ago, I was at a dinner with some people from my industry, a small thing, 8 or 9 people, networking without the agony of formal networking, and I met someone. Her name is Rosalie. She works in UX, she asks good questions, she doesn't try to fill silence with noise. We got coffee the following weekend. Then again the week after. She asked me once, toward the end of a long conversation about work, and how I'd ended up where I was, do you regret going into business with him? Would you do it differently if you could go back? I thought about it. The real answer, not the automatic one. No, I said, not entirely. I learned things I couldn't have learned any other way. About business. About what I'm actually capable of. About which people in my life are going to show up when things get hard. She looked at me like she was trying to decide if that was wisdom or something I'd rehearsed. And which people didn't show up? She asked. Those who's too, I said. Turns out that's just as useful. The ring I used to keep on my desk, not an engagement ring, but the first check we'd ever been paid as Meridian, framed. I threw that out about a month into the lawsuit. Didn't need it anymore. The memory of earning it is mine regardless of what he did afterward. My dad came to see the new office last month. Just showed up, which normally would annoy me, but he brought lunch, and he didn't try to make it into anything more than it was. He walked around, looked at everything and then said, "You built something good here." I said thanks. He said, "You did it the first time too. You just didn't get credit for it." I didn't have a response to that. I didn't need one. Here's what I know now that I wish I'd known before. Betrayal from someone you trust doesn't announce itself. It builds quietly in the background while you're focused on the work. On the growth. On the version of the future you're both supposedly building. By the time it becomes visible, it's already complete. But here's the other thing. The version of you that comes out the other side. The one who had to rebuild from a forged signature on a Tuesday afternoon. The one who had to call his attorney before he called his best friend. The one who had to sit with the fact that his own parents chose comfort over truth. That version is harder to shake. Less likely to assume. More likely to trust slowly and verify quietly. Evan thought he was getting rid of a liability. What he actually did was force me to find out what I was made of when nobody was watching. Turns out, I'm made of something that holds. And for the first time in a long time, I'm not building something to prove it to anyone. I'm building it because I want to, because I'm good at it, because it's mine. That's enough. More than enough. Thanks for reading all the way to the end. If any of this hit close to home, drop a like and stick around. We put out new stories every week.